Hello humans, my name is Slady and welcome to my channel. If you keep up with my Goodread reviews or update videos, you'll already know how much I loved We Need to Talk About Kevin by Lionel Shriver. Before I read the book, however, I watched the movie adaptation of it as a teenager. Thank RK that I didn't try reading the book when I was that age, though. The commentary in We Need to Talk About Kevin is not suited for those with high sensitivities to difficult topics, and the language is equally not accessible to the casual or young reader. Nearly every page had a word on it that I did not instinctively know the definition to. Even now. That said, the connection I felt to Eva, the main character, was profound. I felt a bit for her when I was a teenager, but the narration in the novel is so raw, and I grew irrevocably invested in Eva. Although many of her ideals and revelations are blunt in nature, there's something beautiful about the complex language the narration refuses to stray from in their expression. If you have not watched or read We Need to Talk About Kevin, here's a quick non-spoiler review. I'm not even going to describe it myself like I usually do. I won't do it a better job than Shriver, so I'm just going to read you the back cover. Eva never really wanted to be a mother, and certainly not the mother of an unlovable boy who murdered 7 of his fellow high school students, a cafeteria worker, and a much-adored teacher who tried to befriend him, all 2 days before his 16th birthday. Now, 2 years later, it is time for her to come to terms with marriage, career, family, parenthood, and Kevin's horrific rampage in a series of startlingly direct correspondence with her estranged husband, Franklin. Uneasy with the sacrifices and social demotion of motherhood from the start, Eva fears that her alarming dislike for her son may be responsible for driving him so nihilistically off the rails. Well, that wasn't exactly spoiler-free. It's hard to spoil a novel that recounts things after a known incident, huh? But that's also the beauty of it. This book is so engaging that you want to know every single detail that led up to it. I highly recommend you read this book, regardless of whether you do that before or after this video. I am going to be hitting on my favorite passages and discussion topics in it. This video itself may be kind of long, so in a separate video I'll be comparing the book to the movie, which I've rewatched, and I'll be keeping my movie rating secret for now. But We Need to Talk About Kevin as a novel got 5 out of 5 because I fucking love it. The narration is something that I personally resonate with, and I know it is in many areas too over the top for other readers, but the book is a series of letters and reminiscence. Eva is free to express herself in rants and literary long-windedness, which I am all for. There's something about the way she uses high language to describe blunt conclusions to complicated topics. It just works, okay? And even in the small moments, her reflections feel deeper, like the big words and lengthy sentences are a distraction from the simple emotions humans have. This is an excerpt just from page 5, where Eva is describing the house that she's now living in. As for the decor, it evokes a quality of mockery that feels apt. The downstairs is painted in a slapdash abrasively bright yellow, the brushstrokes carelessly and aerated with streaks of underlying white, as if scrawled with crayon. Upstairs, my bedroom, the walls are sponged amateurishly in aqua like primary school daubs. This tremulous little house, it doesn't feel quite real, Franklin, and neither do I. Did it need the word tremulous? No. Did it get the point across better? Kinda. In my opinion, maybe. I should point out that although a lot of the words in this book are outside ordinary vocabulary, it doesn't feel like this is writing done by some authors, you know, the ones that sit at their desk with a thesaurus and insert smarter sounding words wherever they can. Shriver is just a genuinely intelligent writer, and it doesn't come off as forced because the flow of language is never interrupted by the use of the words. In between Eva recounting her past and present, there's fluid insertion of observations and new conclusions she comes to. It's a bit redundant to say, but it is a very thoughtful novel. I am in many ways biased, and not just because there's this reference to one of my favorite quotes from Brave New World about happiness. Eva is extremely self-reflective, and I think the inclusion of these side thoughts are important. We should all be giving our existence as much thought. Now, I have a hard time coming up with a way of explaining the complex stages Eva describes herself going through, so I've selected 5 small excerpts to read. They are all from within the first 100 pages, and trust me, this does not make you want to read the book any less because I'm giving anything away. With these readings, I hope to paint the start of a profile for you of Eva. So here goes, and I'll discuss it after. Franklin, I was absolutely terrified of having a child. Before I got pregnant, my visions of child rearing, reading stories about cabooses with smiley faces at bedtime, feeding glop into slack mouths, all seemed like pictures of someone else. I dreaded confrontation with what could prove a closed, stony nature, my own selfishness and lack of generosity, the thick, tarry powers of my own resentment. However intrigued by a turn of the page, I was mortified by the prospect of becoming hopelessly trapped in someone else's story. I believe that this terror is precisely what must have snagged me, the way a ledge will tempt one to jump off. The very insurmountability of the task, its very unattractiveness, was in the end what attracted me to it. That was a passage from page 32, and this is a passage from page 58. I'm sorry, but I didn't make these movies up. And any woman whose teeth have rotted, whose bones have thinned, whose skin has stretched, knows the humbling price of a 9-month freeloader. Those nature films of female salmon battling upstream to lay their eggs only to disintegrate, eyes filming, scales dropping, made me mad. The whole time I was pregnant with Kevin, I was battling the idea of Kevin, the notion that I was demoting myself from driver to vehicle, from householder to house. Page 71. I'm no longer sure whether I rued our first child before he was even born. It's hard for me to reconstruct that period without contaminating the memories with the outsized regret of later years. A regret that bursts the constraints of time and gushes into the period when Kevin wasn't there yet to wish away. The last thing I've wanted is to whitewash my own part in this terrible story. That said, I'm determined to accept due responsibility for every wayward thought, every petulance, every selfish moment, not in order to gather all the blame to myself, but to admit this is my fault, and that is my fault. But there, precisely there, is where I draw a line, and on the other side, that, Franklin, that is not. Page 82. Oh, please don't. I know what you'd say. I was exhausted. I had a 37-hour labor, and it was ridiculous to think I'd be capable of feeling anything but weary and numb. It had been absurd to imagine fireworks. A baby is a baby. You'd goad me to remember that nutty little story I told you about the first time I ever went overseas for my junior year abroad at Green Bay. And I stepped onto the airstrip in Madrid to be obscurely disheartened that Spain, too, had trees. Of course Spain had trees. You jeered. I was embarrassed, of course. I knew, in a way, it had trees, but with the sky and the ground and the people walking around, well, it just didn't seem that different. Later, you referenced that anecdote to illustrate that my expectations were always preposterously outsized, that my very ravenousness for the exotic was self-destructive, because as soon as I seized upon the otherworldly, it joined the world and didn't count. And lastly, page 86. I shouldn't have taken it personally. But how could I not? It wasn't Mother's milk that he didn't want, it was Mother. In fact, I became convinced that our little bundle of joy had found me out. Infants have great intuition, because intuition's about all they've got. I felt certain that he could detect a telltale stiffening of my arms when I picked him up. I was confident that he would infer from a subtly exasperated quality in my voice when I burbled and cooed that burbling and cooing did not come naturally to me, and that his precocious ear could isolate in that endless stream of placating blather an insidious, compulsive sarcasm. Moreover, since I had read, you had read, that it is important to smile at infants to try to elicit a smile in response, I smiled and smiled. I smiled until my face hurt, but when my face did hurt, I was sure he could tell. Every time I forced myself to smile, he clearly knew that I didn't feel like smiling, because he never smiled back. He hadn't seen many smiles in his lifetime, but he had seen yours, enough to recognize that in comparison there was something wrong with Mother's. It curled up falsely. It evaporated with revelatory rapidity when I turned from his crib. Is that where Kevin got it? In prison, that marionette smile as if pulled up by strings? So hopefully those couple passages of Eva's feelings before having Kevin and once he was born, recounted from after everything happened, you can see what a complex character this book creates. You want to trust Eva in her description because she is so self-reflective and casts doubt upon herself for you, but at the same time she acknowledges how affected she was by emotions at the time and how nonsensical humans can be to expect trees. There's a constant question of trustworthiness of the narrator, while also a very deep vulnerability of her. I hope I've convinced some of you that this book is worth reading. It's a thrilling exploration of emotions and human psychology, but at its core, we're looking at the ever unanswerable question of nature versus nurture. If you have read We Need to Talk About Kevin, please comment below and tell me your favorite parts. I would love to discuss this. There are so many topics addressed in this book, I can't even begin to cover them. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. I'll have more book reviews and commentaries soon. Keep an eye out for my next video comparing We Need to Talk About Kevin to its film adaptation. I'm Slady, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.